Hey guys, in this video we're going to start talking about the basics of factoring. The first thing we're going to look at is factoring out the greatest common factor, or also referred to as the GCF. And then we want to simplify, as always, as if possible, as our last step. And so when I'm looking at 6t to the fifth plus 2t, I have to find out what's my greatest factor that goes into both 6 and 2. And well, that would be 2. Okay, and so now you also got to take into account for the variables. So one has 5 t's, one has 1. So the largest number they have in common is just 1, so that's what I can pull out. So when you factor something out, it means you divide it out. And so you have 2t, and then if I do 6t to the fifth divided by 2t, that's going to give me 3t to the fourth. And then if I have 2t and I pull out 2t, well, that's just going to leave me 1. And one way you can always check your answer is to just multiply it back through. So 2t times 3t to the fourth is 6t to the fifth. And then 2t plus times 1 is just plus 2t. And notice how it takes me back to where I started. So the factored form is 2t times 3t to the fourth plus 1. Alright, let's look at another one. Let's say here we want to, again, factor out the greatest common factor and then simplify it if possible. So first let's take care of the numbers. So we have 54, 36, and 9. And so if we think about the greatest common factor between those three, it would be 9. And so we're going to pull out a 9. And then one has 2 x's, one has 3, and one has 4. So the largest number of x's they have in common is the 2, so we can also pull out 2 x's. So we're going to pull out 9x squared. We're going to factor that out. And so when we do that, that leaves me, well, 54 divided by 9 is 6, so that leaves me with 6 minus 36 divided by 9 is 4. And then we pulled out, we have 3 x's, we pull 2 out, so it's going to leave me with 1x in the middle. And then plus 9 divided by 9 is 1, x to the fourth divided by x squared leaves me with 2 x's. And there is my factored form. Alright, and again, if you want to just check your answer, you can just multiply it through, and it gets you back to where you started. Okay, so and anytime you're asked to factor, you always want to check to see if there's a GCF. Always see if your first step should be to try to factor out some type of greatest common factor if you can. Alright, next I want us to look at another method of factoring called factor by grouping. And notice that we have 4 terms. Factor by grouping only happens when you have 4 terms. And so here's how factor by grouping works. I'm just going to write down, we got SQ plus SP plus FQ and then plus FP. And so what factoring by grouping does is it wants us to group the terms together, and typically we always group the first 2 and the last 2. And now if I look at that first set of parentheses, does SQ and SP have anything in common? And they do. They have an S, and so I can factor an S out of that first parentheses. Okay, so that's what I'm left with. Now plus here in the middle. Well, now we look at the second set of parentheses, FQ and FP. Well, they have an F in common, so we can take that out. And that leaves me with Q plus P in parentheses. And now what we notice is what's inside parentheses matches up. Do the same thing. And so that becomes, so now we can factor that out, and that becomes one of my factors. And then my other factor is just what I'm left with. Well, I'm left with an S from the first one and an F from the second one. So we're left with S plus F for my second, and that is your factored form. Alright, one more factor by grouping. So again, I'm just going to rewrite the problem. Now sometimes when you group the first 2 and the second 2, they don't have anything in common, so you might have to rearrange them. So let's try this one. So first 2, second 2, got them grouped. So now if I look at the first 2, I can pull the 2 out, and that's going to leave me with 2 minus x. And now if I look at the second 2, what I can do, I can pull out a negative 15y. That's what they have in common. And so now if you take negative 30y and you pull out a 15y, that's going to leave you with a positive 2. And then if you have 15xy and you take out negative 15y, that's going to leave you with minus just x. And again, if you're unsure, you could always multiply that negative 15y through just to make sure it gets you back to where you started. Now again, if we, your goal for factor by grouping is once you group them and then factor out, you want what's in parentheses to be the same. And so here I see it is, so that's 2 minus x becomes my first factor. And your second factor is what you're left with. I'm left with a 2 minus 15y. And there's nothing else I can do there. There's no more factoring that needs to be done. And that's my final factored answer.